we finished the large groups legacies and the family legacies, and we came now to the third tier, which is the individual. And this is the shortest chapter. There are many ways to look at the individual, and I'll tell you how I look at the individual conceptually. There are two forces which shape us. One is a preservation force, the drive to keep living according to the familiar past, according to the inherited values from the ancestors through family and the culture of the large group in which the individual has been born and grew up. This preservation force fosters the conscious and unconscious repetition of inherited behaviors, beliefs, goals, as also trauma. Jodorowsky calls this the imitating force. And indeed, imitating force because under its influence we imitate our parents, we follow to the letter the prescriptions of our culture, we follow popular leaders and fashions, and we barely question the information we are fed with by the loudest channels. The imitating force is extremely powerful. And the second force is an evolutionary force. And here the drive is to break free from the familial past, from the conditioning of the family group, and realize the individual's full potential. And universal consciousness is in this view the ultimate source for creativity, healing, and transformation. When I'll tell you about the spiritual container for this lecture, we will see that universal consciousness is in it an important concept. As individuals, we have also a tent, and the pole of the tent is the ego. The ego, the I, me, mine, myself. The ego keeps everything together. All memories of I, me and myself, my body, my knowledge, my name, my thoughts, my emotions, preferences, taste, moods, my intuitive hunches, my wife, my husband, children, money, house, car, culture, and so on. And the ego and identity are intertwined. Ego and identity can live with each other in harmony or in conflict. For example, living in conflict. If I am gay, yet my ego, under the influence of the preservation force of the norms of society, forbids me to bring my sexual identity into the open and forces me to live in a closet, then there is a conflict between the identity and the ego. As identity is not a monolith but a composite, so is the ego. The ego is everything what we are aware of, and the unconscious is not part of the ego. The boundaries between the ego and the unconscious are porous, and some places have even holes. Yet there are also points where the borders between the ego and the unconscious are tightly shut. To understand better what the ego is, I'll use two metaphors. One, the ego as fortress. The ego holds everything together, as already stated, is like a fortress inside which all the components of the composite, so my name, my memories, my culture, and so on, take shelter. The fortress can be very strong, withstand storms, attacks of all kind, can grow in size or can be very weak, truly ramshackle, easily overwhelmed, lose its sovereignty if it has ever been sovereign. Its very history can be recorded truthfully or distorted and falsified. Thus we have strong egos, weak egos, inflated egos, egos with very complicated complexes, and when under psychedelic influence, we can even experience a dissolution of the ego, which can be absolutely terrifying or blissful. The ego fortress is defended with various weapons. These are a topic of research on themselves, since Anna Freud, Sigmund's daughter, published in 1936 her seminal book The Ego and Its Defense Mechanisms. Denial, rationalization, repression, regression, projection, avoidance, splitting. These are the main. And the fortress has to be defended against what the ego perceives as assaults from the outside world and from the internal world, forces from the unconscious, which sometimes plan through insurgencies. The ego functions as fortress mainly when it gazes inside, when it shuts itself off from the outer world to mobilize its defense mechanisms, or when it has to accomplish some other inner work. 2. The ego as a central government of a country. Well, compare yourself to a country. In this case, your ego is a central government of the country. And the central government has to handle the country's finances, military, health, education, law and order. It has to pay the bills. It has borders which need to be protected. The ego has to maintain relationships with neighboring countries and gets regularly embroiled in conflicts and even wars. The ego has to negotiate between the inner and the outer world and decide courses of action. The ego can be democratic, tolerant, magnanimous, or authoritarian, stingy, even totalitarian. It can be egalitarian, sexist, racist, and so on. It may be weak, small, or grandiose, entitled, rapacious. The ego can exile inconvenient parts of itself to the unconscious. Ultimately, the ego is a construction, from quite simple to dizzyingly complicated. So I hope you get an idea about the ego, the unconscious, and the role they play in how the individual navigates his/her life circumstances. I don't know if you noticed, but governments and the countries they represent behave like individuals. Listen to news from this perspective and you will recognize the same dynamic. With this observation, we move from the individual back to the large group. The large group becomes paradoxically a fractal of the individual. And with this, the circle is closed. Large group, family, individual, large group. It is a wheel moving incessantly, movement to which we, as individuals, and all families and all large groups participate. This is our basic condition. We are tied to this wheel, and by extrapolation, to the big existential wheel, the wheel of life and death. while negotiating two forces: the preservation force, bent upon to keep us tied up, and the evolutionary force, pushing us to free ourselves. And the preservation force is mostly victorious. So far about the individual. In the next part, I'll tell you more about the big existential wheel, the wheel of life and death, of creation and destruction. So the title of this talk is Transgenerational Legacies from a Historical, Psychological and Spiritual Perspective. And we have arrived now at the spiritual perspective. The spiritual container for this lecture is a shamanic medicine wheel. And you can see here a medicine wheel on a Native American side. The medicine wheel is also called the wheel of the four directions, the wheel of life and death, the wheel of creation and destruction, and the wheel of transformations. What is it? What is the wheel? The wheel is a metaphysical space-time machine, which means it refers to the primordial matrix for creation, space and time. Space, because it revolves around the four cardinal directions, and time, because it is built on both the solar and lunar cycles. The wheel is a multi-layered and complex blueprint of creation and all its phenomena, uncovering underlying laws and linking the inner and outer worlds. When we work with a wheel, we work with three elements. One is the wheel itself, which we draw or we install in the landscape, like you can see. I always have the wheel installed in my garden. Then all phenomena, the rhythms of nature, the laws of nature, all beings, all processes, and our own inner world. And we are always on the wheel. We can never get lost if we know the wheel and work with it. By contacting the wheel, we can always know where we are and in which direction we need to go. So let's dive into it. Daan van Kampenhout is a Western shaman of Dutch origin, and he has apprenticed with Lakota and Sami indigenous shamans. Besides, for a number of years, he corresponded with Bert Hellinger and accompanied Hellinger in some of his workshops. In a private interview I had with Hellinger in Stockholm in 2002, Hellinger confessed to me that Daan has helped him to understand better what he was doing. Daan wrote a number of books. The most beautiful are Images of the Soul, which is a kind of dialogue with Hellinger, and The Tears of the Ancestors. And it is from Daan van Kampenhout that I learned about the wheel of the four directions. In the medicine wheel, the four cardinal directions, east, south, west, north, are more than astronomical concepts for orienteering and navigating. They are cosmic powers, and they have qualities which permeate the entire creation, all phenomena, and they permeate us, our body-mind. On the wheel in the east, we can contact the powers of dawn, morning, first moon quarter, spring, all beginnings, falling in love, starting a new job, a new business, a new project. In the south, we can contact midday, full moon, summer, peak of activity. In the west, evening, dusk, last moon quarter, ending, harvesting, evaluating, discarding, letting go. In the north, winter, new moon, resting, hibernating, incubating. Northeast is a point of conception, and west-north is a point of dying. In Hinduism and Buddhism, mandalas are used as spiritual symbols representing the cosmos. They often depict the life on our planet as a microcosmos. Hence, mandala can be understood as a sacred circle or cosmic diagram that represents the cosmic order. So, a medicine wheel is a mandala, and everything what exists we find on the wheel. In this drawing, we find the elements. In the east, water; in the south, fire; in the west, earth; and in the north, air. I told you that the wheel is multi-layered, and we can zoom in each and every phenomenon and uncover the deeper layer. So here I zoom into the water element, and then I find in the east the different fluids. In the east I find the amniotic sac, in the south blood and lymph, in the west tears and urine, and in the north all fluids. If I zoom on breathing, in the east is breathing in the south is the rhythm of breath, in the west breathing out, and in the north the absence of breath. For our topic, transgenerational legacies, two wheels are relevant. One is a shamanic wheel of generations, and then in the east, where all beginnings are the children; in the south, the parents; in the west, the grandparents; and in the north, the ancestors. And the other wheel which is relevant for the topic is the wheel of souls. And actually this wheel we find inside the wheel of the north. And then we have in the east of the north, we have the family soul; in the south, the tribal soul; in the west, the individual soul; and in the north, the ancestors' soul and the universal soul. And when I was working on this lecture, I used these two wheels. And what I understood, what I discovered, is the power of the tribal soul, and also how the individual soul is immersed in the family soul and in the tribal soul. And this process of self-differentiation or individuation of Jung is not for everybody. It is, and the goal is the movement from the individual soul towards the universal soul. And this is the task of the evolutionary force. So to summarize, the will is a tool, an instrument for self-knowledge, for problem solving, for gaining new insights, even for resting, for feeling peace, which we can feel in the north. And these are achieved by working the will following certain rules. This is the end of my presentation and the conclusion. When we address transgenerational legacies, we deal with three tiers: large groups like tribe, ethnic group, nation, religious group, and so on; the family, fulcrum between the large group and the individual; and the individual. In the big group, we are confronted with the collective consciousness of the large group, with historical traumas and with chosen traumas and chosen glories. In the family, we deal with secrets, merits and debts, hidden and overt loyalties, constructive and destructive entitlement. Related to family, the 6 people I presented to you, Bowlby, Bowen, Bosher-Meninoj, Hellinger, Hodorowski, have very different approaches, theoretical, research-wise, methodological, yet came to very similar conclusions. The family influences consciously and unconsciously next generations. Family members who don't know each other, don't even know about each other's existence, are tied to each other by invisible legacies. The individual, the family, and the big group are interconnected. As individuals, we can liberate ourselves of the destructive aspects of the legacy from the large group and the family by becoming aware of the conditioning, by increasing our self-differentiation and evolving towards and tapping into the potential, infinite potential of the universal consciousness. One last personal note. How have these concepts helped me in my work as psychiatrist, psychotherapist, and psychedelic therapist? So they have deepened and broadened my understanding about the dynamics of what is going on in the world, in a family, and in an individual. They have given me a bigger toolbox. One time one concept is helpful, another time another concept in the course of the therapy with the same client. And one time one technique works, other time another. Besides, I integrate in my approach hypnotic techniques which expand the consciousness of the client I work with, and the somatic approach, the felt sense which Eugen Gendlin has developed. All this together gives me a lot of flexibility. With the help of these instruments, I do my best to offer my clients tailor-made interventions to help them heal, transform, and evolve.